In the shimmering light of the twin moons casting their glow across the crystalline plains of Erindor, the alien princess known as Lyra stood at the edge of the royal starship, her heart pounding with the weight of an encounter she had never anticipated. Her violet eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement, her silken robes trailing behind her in the warm alien breeze. She could feel the presence of the approaching soldier before she saw him, his energy radiating through the dense atmosphere of the planet like a beacon of intensity. The princess clenched her fists, trying to center herself to calm the flurry of emotions racing through her thoughts, for she knew that this meeting was not one she could avoid, nor one she could afford to mishandle. Her planet hung in the balance, a fragile thread connecting peace and war, and she was the fulcrum upon which that balance teetered, her people depending on her to negotiate with the strange and unpredictable beings from the planet known as Terra. Lyra had studied the Terrans in preparation for this day, poring over holographic records and linguistic patterns, trying to make sense of their customs and their strange emotional volatility. They seemed at once primitive and impossibly complex, a race driven by both compassion and conquest. Their soldiers were the epitome of this duality, fierce and disciplined, yet often moved by loyalty to ideals rather than mere commands. When the soldier appeared cresting the ridge that marked the meeting point, Lyra felt her breath catch in her throat. His figure was formidable, encased in armor that gleamed under the moonlight, his strides purposeful, his eyes scanning his surroundings with the precision of a predator. Yet something about his demeanor intrigued her. He carried not only the weight of his weapons, but also the gravity of his mission. As he drew closer, she could see the lines of tension on his face, his jaw set in determination, and his gaze flickering with something she could only describe as cautious curiosity. The moment their eyes met, a silent exchange passed between them, a recognition of the stakes that bound them together, the future of their worlds resting on this tenuous thread of understanding. Her voice emerged steady, yet tinged with the undertones of the storm within her. "I welcome you, warrior of Terra, to the lands of Erindor." Though the words carried no punctuation, their meaning resonated in the shared stillness, her hands gesturing in a universal sign of openness. The soldier halted a few paces away, his gaze unwavering as he assessed her every detail, his stance betraying a mix of readiness and restrained. His voice, when it came, was deep and steady. "Thank you, Princess of Erindor, for granting this meeting between our peoples." It was clear he chose his words carefully, weighing each one before it left his lips. As the two stood facing each other, a palpable tension filled the air, unspoken yet undeniable. It was not merely the tension of two representatives of different worlds, but of two individuals navigating the fragile terrain of diplomacy while carrying the burdens of their personal fears and hopes. Lyra could sense the soldier's unease even as he held himself with the discipline of a warrior. She took a step forward, her movements deliberate, and measured her presence luminous under the alien moons. "We are here to find a way forward, a path that does not lead to the destruction of what we both hold dear." The soldier nodded, his expression unreadable, but she could sense the faintest flicker of something human beneath his stoic exterior. The meeting stretched into the night, neither willing to concede too much, yet both unwilling to walk away from the possibility of peace. Lyra found herself struggling to keep her emotions in check, her voice calm, her gestures precise, even as her mind raced with doubts and fears. Would her people see this as weakness? Would the Terrans take her concessions as signs of vulnerability? The soldier, too, seemed to grapple with an inner turmoil, his responses measured and cautious, yet carrying an undercurrent of sincerity that Lyra could not ignore. There was something about him, something that made her believe in the possibility of a shared future, even as the weight of centuries of mistrust threatened to crush the fragile moment they had created. As the hours stretched on, the landscape of Erindor transformed under the shifting light of its twin moons, their hues deepening from pale silver to a glowing blue. Lyra found herself losing track of time, yet acutely aware of every word spoken, every gesture exchanged between her and the Terran soldier. Their dialogue unfolded like a delicate dance, neither stepping too far nor holding back too much. Through their exchange, she began to see glimpses of the man behind the armor. His name was Kale, a soldier shaped by a lifetime of service, but still driven by a quiet hope for something greater. He spoke of his home, a world burdened by its own struggles, a planet where war had often consumed peace, yet one where beauty still thrived in the hearts of its people. His words resonated with her, for they mirrored the story of her own world. Lyra shared her truths too. She spoke of Erinda's fragile ecosystems, its shimmering cities, powered by ancient crystals that hummed with energy and life. She described the bond her people shared with their land, how every decision was made with the understanding that they were merely caretakers of something far greater than themselves. As she spoke, Cable listened, his stern features softening ever so slightly, his gaze lingering on her as if he were seeing her not as an alien princess, but as someone much like himself. Despite the connection forming between them, the weight of their responsibilities remained unyielding. Every pause in their conversation seemed to echo with the unspoken truth that their worlds stood at the brink of war. One false step could shatter the fragile bridge they were building, and neither dared to imagine the consequences. As dawn approached, painting the skies of Erindor with streaks of violet and gold, Kale finally broke the silence, his voice low and steady. There is a chance here for something different, princess, but trust is not built in a single night, and peace will not come without sacrifice. His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, and Lyra knew he was right. She stepped closer to him, her gaze unwavering, though her heart raced within her. I do not seek to erase the past, Kale, but I believe in the possibility of a future where our peoples can coexist, where strength does not mean domination, and where differences can be bridges instead of walls. She extended her hand, a gesture that held no words but carried the weight of her conviction. Kale hesitated for a moment, his eyes searching hers as if trying to discern the sincerity of her offer. Then slowly he reached out his gloved hand, meeting hers. The contact was brief, yet it felt like a seismic shift, as if the very fabric of their worlds had shifted toward a new alignment. In that moment, Lyra felt a flicker of hope, not just for her people or his, but for the possibility that even in the vastness of the universe, beings from different stars could find common ground. She knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but for the first time, she felt ready to face them. As Kale turned to leave, his silhouette framed by the rising sun, he glanced back at her, and she saw the faintest trace of a smile on his lips. It was not a promise, but a sign that he too believed in the fragile hope they had kindled together. When he disappeared over the ridge, Lyra stood alone, yet she did not feel alone. Her heart still racing, but now steady with resolve, she turned toward her starship,